Welcome back to MetaMinds Online. We are a mentoring service helping conscious people destroy their limiting beliefs so that they can unlock the life of their dreams. And on today's episode, we're talking about the number one skill that you need to improve in 2021.
And that is communication, but more specifically, active listening. So just to set it up a little bit, obviously everyone has experienced 2020, right? But before that, everyone in the world could kind of feel the itch of not really having fulfilling relationships and communication and really being able to express themselves fully among their friends and their peers, and therefore actually have, fulfilling social environment, which is one of the key for Maslow's hierarchy of needs, quite obviously. And 2020 has made that much worse. Everyone's more physically distanced. You're actually told not to be close to people.
Yeah.
I've had a lot of Zoom calls and you can get connection, but there is that lack of that actual human element.
Yeah.
Even though it is a little disgusting being in the room with you. But
thank you.
These are the sacrifices we make for you guys, okay? It's just a huge problem that people are more apart than ever before. And if you're listening, I'm sure that this hits on you because it definitely hits on us. We've felt it, and we're in a country that's least affected by what's going on pretty much in the world. I think we're doing some of the best.
Well. Yeah.
Not to flex on you guys, actually. It's a really horrible flex.
Yeah.
But the point is that we are feeling the disconnection, and we're in a very lucky situation.
Exactly. And I guess we can't even comprehend the people who are genuinely isolated, who physically can't leave the house. People who have been ordered to stay in the house. So it's like you're forced to be disconnected and have a lack of connection.
So everyone's more separated than ever before. And so relationships are dwindling. People have less friends than ever. And the friends that you do have, say they don't generally give you as much as you kind of think that you need. And it's funny, we already had a podcast about this recently, but we're going to dive a little bit more specifically into this because communication is something that has been lacking in a very large way. And the main thing is that a lot of people don't realize it, and it's just very common. And so to let the cat out of the bag, I suppose, is that the main thing is people talk about themselves too much, in short, right? And that's okay, right? Because people are just talking about their experience, okay? And that's all that they know, They grew up as a child, and all that they knew that existed was how the world interacted with them. So it was all I. And then also we're born into a world that is a bit more egocentric, talking about how do you look, how do you feel. So it's all about you, and that's what all the marketing is about.
Yeah.
So we're kind of conditioned to have this kind of ego element.
Yes.
It's not necessarily an ego element when somebody's talking about themselves. Ironically, I'm doing all the talking on this podcast so far. I'll let you talk in a second if you're good, dude. No.
Sorry.
We are going to give some examples in a second as well.
Yeah. But yeah, I think also in terms of the Western world in particular, let's just say America and Australia for this example, it's built on the concept that it's an individualized world where you as a person can achieve your wildest dreams. But in Eastern cultures, it's more of a family, community-centered experience. So I think for us in Australia, which is very Americanized, that kind of I mentality is drilled into us through school, through our parents. It's the norm. So again, like you said, it's not necessarily anyone's fault as such. It's this is a byproduct of your environment and a byproduct of the way that our society kind of operates. And the way that we framed it at the beginning, it is a skill. It's something that you actively have to do to actually be active in a conversation and to listen to someone and put your agendas aside. That's a skill because it's uncommon. You have something to say, you want to say something, or you resonate with something. And for a lot of people, they, if you were to scale them of what's your communication style like, I'm sure people would put themselves closer to a 10 thinking, yeah, I'm pretty good at communicating. But when you actually kind of boil it down and learn what communication looks like and how you actually share a communication path with someone, most of the time people aren't actually letting another person speak, or they're not actually listening. And if you were to ask them, hey man, what did I just say? They go, oh, I don't know, I was thinking about myself.
Yeah, I'm ready to talk. What are you talking about?
Yeah, what were you saying? So, I don't care.
Are you here right now?
Sorry, I was just kind of talking to my... And actually, the meta thing about it is people see themselves in you. So when they try to communicate, they're actually trying to communicate to a mirror. So they want to hear back what they're saying, to reflect on what they're saying, and they're kind of using you as that mirror. And that's fine, again. Like, that's how people have learned. But I guess what we're trying to say is that communications can be deeper and richer, and you can actually build really fucking strong friendships with someone if you actively listen and care about what the other person says.
That leave you very energized, you know? And it's like, yeah, I have this with a couple of other friends where it's like, you know, you can be like, oh man, not really in the mood to hang. You just say that to yourself or whatever. Then you end up going and hang out with that person. You leave and you're like, you know, up when before that you actually weren't. And, you know, I'll just pose the question to the audience. It's like, have you recently had an encounter with a friend or an acquaintance where you have left fulfilled because you had a really amazing time because there was shared communication? Or also on the other side of it, have you left somebody feeling absolutely exhausted?
Yes, deflated.
Yeah,
like
because
drained
you've just
energy.
been listening to somebody attack you with words the whole time.
Yeah.
And so it's a problem that we've noticed, and we could be sitting in a bubble. We could be entirely wrong here, but it's all theory, dude, right?
Yeah, well, that's it.
But no, it's our experience, and it's a valid one. Okay, so the meta
Don't question it.
We like to have fun here and get better at the same time. Okay, that's why we listen to this podcast. So yeah, it's like we've noticed a lot recently, and you know, definitely seen the behavior in a lot of different people where it just seems people don't even think about it at all. They're just glazed over and they just talk and talk and talk and talk, and they can't even read the room to the fact that you're sitting there like what is happening? Like, are you even, you know?
Am I even here really? Like, it's kind of like you fade away into yourself. Like, what's happening? Like, it becomes like an echo chamber where you just hear words. And it's actually, when that happens as well, like, being an active listener like you and I and caring what people say, it actually becomes really hard to kind of connect it together because there's like a lot of words, a lot of just the way I see it is like consciousness just flowing out of someone's mouth. It's just like thoughts. It's like we all have an abundance of thoughts, and like the statistic is that we have 60 to 70,000 thoughts a day. So like that's a lot of thoughts. And when you're with someone who's regurgitating that, it feels like there's thousands of kind of words coming out, and it's like kind of trapped, I guess, or they haven't been able to express it, or they feel like they have to get that consciousness out.
Because also they don't get it anywhere else.
Yeah, of course.
So you could be that friend that a friend comes and they go, they don't have other friends that they're allowed to just word vomit everything.
Yeah.
So they just want somebody to listen. And that's what everyone wants, right? And this is the thing that we're talking about here, is that if you can balance that out so that you can regurgitate some of the stuff that you want to say so that they do some listening, and it's the other way around, and you can hone that skill, your relationships are going to be amazing and you are going to have really fulfilling experiences and leave feeling energized.
Yeah, exactly.
So to give like a bit of a personal example, I had one, but it's gone. I was thinking about it and you were talking. I was I was waiting for my turn to talk, but you were talking over the top of me. So classic example. That's my example now.
Great. Well, should we do the gym example that we had before?
Yeah.
So like we'll give a few examples so that you guys can actually visually see and auditory experience the different experiences of communication.
A 4D experience.
It's a 4D experience. You'll also feel some wind on the back of your neck as well.
Oh my
so
God,
watch
we're
out
getting
for
a
that.
bit silly in this one.
Okay, so yeah, man, the other day I was at the gym and like I PB'd, like my personal best I've ever done. I think I lifted like 4 kilos.
Dude, that's sweet, man. Dude, I was at the gym the other day and I actually hit a PB as well. And yeah, I hit like 6 kilos. And dude, I've been going to the gym heaps recently and it's been really sweet.
Right.
And so like in that example,
like you basically cut me off before. I could have had more to say there.
Yeah.
You know, and like you resonated with like the fact that you had hit a personal best as well, and you clicked the two, and it wasn't something you could hold in. That's kind of the thing. Like we all have thoughts that we want to regurgitate, but you kind of just have to hold it.
Yeah.
Like it's okay to hold it and not let it come through. So I guess that was an example of you just coming through, maybe. And then we've got like a questioning example, maybe. So yeah, man, the other day I was at the gym and I hit my PB. It was like 4 kilos.
Dude, that's really cool. I think the last time you were on like 2 kilos, is that right? What's the journey been like to get to like 4 kilos? Tell me a bit more about that.
Yeah, it was a pretty good journey. I was at like 2 kilos maybe 4 years ago. It's taken a while for me to go to 3, and now I'm at 4 kilos.
That's sweet, man. But how does it feel now that you're on 4 kilos?
Yeah, it feels good, man. I never thought I'd get there, you know? So I'm pretty proud of myself.
So there's a bit more of an example. We're not actors, as you can tell. We might flash up on the screen here, not paid actors or. But that's an example of you nailed it perfectly, because it's like you just have to, because you're having all these thoughts, right, and you're in a social environment, right, even if it's one-on-one, you're going to have to let those thoughts go, because you're going to see so many opportunities where you're like, oh, I could say that, I could say that, I could say that, it could add value, or I could talk about myself here or whatever. And it's like, yes, but that person is talking about something that's important to them right now. How can I add value to them? What can I do to make them feel fulfilled, like they're actually saying what they need to say? And then afterwards, like magic, after they've said everything and they feel like they've actually been listened to, they'll just automatically turn on you and say, what about you?
Exactly. Yeah.
Just like magic. And that's the thing, is like, it's not your fault if you're doing this and you're recognizing that you're doing this. It's not your fault, as we literally just said, because you're just having thoughts and they're just coming out, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But if you can just sit for a second and be like, okay, let's see what else I can get out of this person. You know what I mean? And just so that I can just manipulate them. That took a dark turn.
I think also, because I had a few things as you were talking that I was thinking about, wanting to say, wanting to add. But another thing that like really hits me is when I'm on the receiving end of like a barrage of just words after I've said something. So I might have said something and then the other person's kind of jumped in and started talking. It almost invalidates everything I've said.
Yeah.
It makes me actually feel like, why did I say
Yeah, why did you say anything?
Did you care what I said? Or was it kind of just a jumping post for you to say something?
Yeah, it's just a trigger for them to be like, oh, cool, yeah. You did a jumping post.
And that's kind of that mirror concept almost. It's like I've said something and it's bounced back off the mirror and then they've gone, oh, that actually resonates with me. I see myself in that. And then they have to say something. So yeah, that's another thing. Just another example, like we won't do the role play, but another example when I say that I've hit my PB is, we've got the questioning, which really helps kind of pull out more, but you've also got just minimal encouragers. And what they are is basically when you nod, that's a minimal encourager, or when you go, oh yeah, or oh cool. Like you're not actually taking the conversation, but you're showing that you're listening through your action, through your body language. So that's another way that you can go, oh, okay. And that kind of comes up when you feel like maybe the other person hasn't finished what they're saying. Maybe they had more to say there. So it's like, okay, keep talking. You're allowing them, you're giving them that option to talk. And again, it's a skill that a lot of people don't have. And it can kind of become a little bit frustrating for someone on the other end.
And another prime example is this one right here. It's so common nowadays for people to be like, no, I'm listening. For those just listening, I'm like sitting on my phone now.
Yeah.
And, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, I was so adamantly against this. Whenever I saw people, I was like, why are you doing that? I don't understand, because we're in an environment with people. Why are you on Facebook on your phone right now? But then, a couple of years go past and I noticed that I started to do stuff like that. And it's like, oh, this is my break during the day or whatever it is. So I'm going to be doing that. And it's like, just put it down, dude, because you're having this right now and it's just way more fulfilling than any like little dopamine hit that you're going to get on your phone, which you can do at any other time when you're by yourself.
Yeah.
Which is like another huge social cue that, some people don't get. And look, I'm not, amazing at it all the time. And if you're hanging out with a friend for like 10 hours, like you're going to do some scrolling. That's how it goes.
That's exactly right.
But so like where all this kind of theory came from, for me at least, is like in the last kind of year or so, I've kind of really realized that this is a huge key to like actually having a successful life, really, to make it a little bit larger than it may seem to you, to just reframe it. Because you can go into any social situation, right, and ask a person about them. And we've all heard it before, what is it, 48 Laws of Power, or how to win friends and influence people. It's in all of those books, right? And it's like, maybe read those books. They were like some of my first self-development books like 8 years ago or something. It's like, not even hit puberty yet. I'm like, oh yeah, this sounds pretty good.
Young personal development aim. And damn.
I didn't actually love that book when it came out. It just seems so like manipulated. But anyway, it's a good point. And it's like, but yeah, it seems to, you're like, yeah, I know that, but you just skim past it, Yeah. But it's like, you can literally go into any social situation, I don't want to go to this party tonight. Oh my God, I have to socialize. But then all of a sudden you get there, you're like, hey man, how are you? How do you know so-and-so? What are you into? Oh, boom. And then it's like, tell me more about that. And then you can just sit there and chill. And they will talk to you for hours. And at the end of it, they'll be like, yeah, the Eamon guy, man, love that dude. He's super sick.
Yeah.
And you didn't do anything.
Exactly.
You didn't say anything. You just got to chill.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
And that's another thing. Like, I think when you're on the receiving end of someone who is actually a good active listener and who actually cares about what you're saying, you will leave that situation feeling heard.
Yeah.
Because the other person is asking you questions. And like you said, potentially they don't have any friends like that. There's a reason why they're regurgitating it. Like, if they were fulfilled in a lot of different avenues and they had lots of friends who were, active listening and caring what they said, then there's a big element of that. There's also an element of like narcissism as well, where it's like potentially you feel like you're doing something that's more valid than someone else. Like there is potentially also a manipulative element
and that's
to
where
it.
that's where the ego comes in.
Yeah.
Because it's almost like, for example, if I was jealous of your PB and you're hitting higher weights than me, or like, that's a totally different social situation where instead of me butting in because I saw an opportunity to say, it's actually my slippery little ego being like, I have to one up him right now because I feel like worse because he's doing more than me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's another reason why you might be doing that. You're like, oh, that's cool. Yeah, no, I hit a PB as well. And you just start talking about yourself because you need to feel bigger than you actually feel because your ego's involved. Whereas like, if Dan's hitting like a couple hundred more or 2 more kilograms in this instance more than me,
please be realistic.
because I try and be as egoless as possible, and also we have different bodies. I'm genuinely like, dude, that's awesome.
Are you body shaming me?
a little bit, dude.
Yeah.
You're doing it yourself, man.
Yeah, I know. Tell me about it.
I'm genuinely excited for you, like hitting that PB. There's no like ego where I'm like, oh my god, yeah, no, whatever. Like, oh well, I hit this. What I mean? But there's just another element of like that could be why you're jumping into a social situation.
Exactly right, and there could be an element of like. Also, in that example, like we'll play the gender card here, potentially. If you're a man and a man tells you something that they're doing better than you, there could be an element of like feeling emasculated. Potentially that could be your father. We'll get very deep, like father, childhood, your upbringing, school. Potentially there's an element of like you feel like you have to overfunction. You feel like, okay, well, I'm doing 6, so you have to know that I'm doing more than you.
Yeah.
It's like, but that's not
and you're
valid,
you're not even aware that that's like why you're doing that.
Yeah. And like imagine for the other person receiving that information, like they've told you something that they're proud of and you're telling them that they're not as good as you. Like, how would the other person feel?
Yeah.
It's like, well, you've literally just invalidated my whole
experience. You're doing
experience.
the opposite.
Yeah.
Whereas if you did the opposite and you're like, that's really cool, man, then you'd have an awesome relationship. But your ego doesn't see it that way. It just needs to see it. It has to feel big. So, like we're talking about communication here, but it's like, it always comes back to the ego and limiting beliefs.
Yeah.
Really. But
there is one more kind of note, because you were saying that, with active listening and communication, like you'll notice, for example, when you're at, like you said, with a party or wherever you're at, you may feel like, oh, it's a bit of a thing, I have to go and do this. And then when you're there and you ask questions about someone else, you'll find that the time will kind of fly by and you won't actually have lulls in conversation, because when you actually allow someone to talk, you'll notice that they'll run with it, because
unless they're a really good active listener.
There we go. And then it's just you're sitting there like, no, tell me about you. And they're like, no, you tell me about you. But a good example of this for me recently is going for job interviews. So when I've been going to job interviews, the kind of concept is, well, you've got to sell yourself, right? And you've got to kind of talk about yourself. And I do that to some extent, but I also flip it. And I want to actually know about the company and the organization, what mission statement they have, and why I should work for them. Because it's like, that's all well and good going, yeah, I'm good and I've got this degree and I'm great and whatever. But the reality is, it's like, you also have to work in that environment. So you would like to potentially know what the job's going to look like. Why did you start this organization? What are your 5-year plans? What's your team culture look like? Because they're the kind of questions that will actually be relevant to your experience in the role. If the team culture is, well, we really try to encourage people to connect and help each other and grow together, that's a lot more powerful than, oh yeah, we just kind of go about on our own thing. Like, you won't see anyone probably for like a year, and then you'll come into the office, you might say hi to someone. Like, okay, like there's 2 different experiences there. So I think even active listening in any situation is really relevant, and kind of the communication element where you flip it on them instead of you just selling. Because in any interview, it's like you sell yourself. But that stands out. Not many people would go, tell me about your company and why did you start it and why is this so important to you? That normally gets them to talk, and then you're kind of interviewing them. And that's the process.
And so, to really dive into what we're talking about here, the reason that this is the number one skill that you have to improve for 2021, or whatever we name the title at the beginning, is because nobody is exempt from this. everybody, unless you have practiced being an active listener and your communication skills, everybody has that voice that wants to jump in and talk about themselves. And if you are asked a question, you will jump in and talk about yourselves. So the reason this is the best skill to hone is that if you can just suppress that voice or just see that voice, it comes back to awareness. We say it in every episode. You can see that voice and you just go, no, I'm gonna talk about them.
Yeah.
You just like so much power because, you know, this is your ego trying to jump in and it wants to talk about you and your experience. And if you can hone that skill where you're actually in control of yourself, really, then yeah, it's like all links up to everything. Really, it's a sort of mindfulness. You know?
It is a sort of mindfulness.
Self-awareness.
That's literally what I was going to say. Yeah.
And then
that's awesome.
With also the ripple effect is you have more fulfilling relationships. They end up practicing their communication because you're practicing your communication. Literally everybody wins. You get to say some of what you want to say. They get to say some of what they want to say.
Yeah. You will notice you'll have richer friendships, you know? And I'm sure for a lot of people out there who potentially are guilty, and again, not everyone does it at some point in their life, but for the people who are like extremely guilty of just talking about themselves, you will notice that those friendships that they have will not be as deep or rich, and there's potentially a lack of connection and fulfillment. And then it's a self-fulfilling prophecy because then they don't change their communication style and they stumble across a new friend and they talk about themselves. And then after a period of time, that friend maybe pulls away and then they lose that friend. And it just becomes a thing where they're never actually fulfilled, but they don't know why that is. Oh, you know, I talk about myself and I'm friendly and I'm extroverted and I have fun, but it's like, but the other person probably doesn't feel validated. And on that note, one of the biggest skills that I had to learn like throughout my entire counseling degree is active listening. That's like one of the things they really dive into.
You're getting paid to practice this, dude.
Literally, like that's a skill, and that's something that they actually have a whole section on. It's like communication, active listening, and validating the client's story. So you gave a really good example before with the gym when you were asking a question. One of them is actually like rephrasing what someone else has said. And that shows the other person that you've actually listened. So when I said something, you said, "Wow, man, that's really cool that you're at 4 kilos. I remember you told me that you were at 2 last time." It's like you've connected that, you've rephrased it, and you've also remembered a previous time. So I feel like you've listened.
Yeah.
You know, it's like that's a skill that you have to learn. And that's something they drill into you in a therapy setting. So it's like, it isn't, again, just something that comes naturally. It's something you actually have to practice. And like you said, you will notice a high frequency of thought. And that will happen in any situation you're in. And it actually takes your intention to go, okay, I've got that thought, but like that will fade away. And if it's relevant when they stop finishing, I'll bring it up.
Yeah.
But if it's not relevant, then it probably doesn't matter that they don't hear my opinion on that. You know, like they're not going to wither away to nothing that I haven't been able to tell them that I'm doing 6 kilos.
Yeah. I'm not that important, really.
Yeah.
And just on that memory thing, you'll notice that when somebody does that to you, when they actually remember a detail about your past, it literally happened to us last night when somebody talked about our podcast, you know, they actually like remembered when they're not in a kind of relevant kind of scene to that. So you wouldn't expect that person to say that thing. And it kind of catches you off guard. You're like, you know what I mean? You have that little like, someone knows something about me and they asked me about that thing about me.
Yeah.
You know, like that specific thing that you wouldn't expect that person to remember. And it just makes you feel so amazing. So if it makes you feel amazing, imagine when you do it to other people. And it just takes a little bit of effort to be like, your dog's name's Sally. I'm going to remember that. And it's like, how's Sally going?
Yep.
You're like, well, it's Bob, but thank you.
Thanks for that, yeah. And you'll actually see, like, if you look into, and we're not going to dive into politics because I'm not a fan of politics and we will not discuss that, but in terms of politics and people who have been successful political campaigns or representatives for a party, you'll notice that they remember so many names. They'll remember small details about people, and there have been books written on people who will remember, even like personal development, like gurus, we'll say, for a lack of a better word, they will remember the name of someone and one small detail about that person. And Tony Robbins does this actually really well when he'll see someone he hasn't seen in a while, and he meets hundreds and hundreds of, thousands of people, and he'll remember someone's name, and he'll go, John, was it? And then they'll go, what, you remember my name? And then they'll go, how's your dog going? And, you know, he'll express how that's going. It's like, that is insane to actually feel like anyone cares about you, but the people who have amazing influence and power, for them to also remember that as well, it's like, that's next level, you know? And it shows you that they're a leader and that they're good at active listening and they actually care about what you're saying. It's not like, oh, well, I have 4 dogs. I don't care. again, what's the relevance? Like other people are valuable. Everyone has value.
You know who else
So,
is
yes.
really good at that? Baristas.
Yeah,
You'll
they are
notice
actually.
that the reason if you're into coffee, the reason that you are loyal to your local cafe is because you go there and they say, "Hey Dan, it's like nice to see you again. There's soy cappuccino, right?" And you're
Yeah.
like, "Oh yeah, it feels special, you know." And they're
100%.
like, "Oh dude, how's the new place going?" or whatever, you know. So
Yeah.
and it's those tiny details that's a part of their job, but that makes you feel special. Anyway, I think we've harped on about it enough.
Yep.
I would just want to reframe this question again to the audience because we want to hear from you guys and we love it when you guys reach out. It's fulfilling to us when we get to hear about your story. Have you, either are you guilty of talking too much? And are you going to try and improve on this? Or has this podcast potentially helped you see that for yourself? Or do you feel like you're the one that's never being listened to or heard? There's one or two. Sometimes you can be one, sometimes you can be the other, or sometimes you're more one or the other.
Exactly. And I think we should put a challenge out to people. So,
snap.
you know, like the next time you're in a conversation with someone and you usually go to whatever your approach is, you talk about yourself, you cut in. When you think about someone else talking, maybe try to reframe it in your mind. Like we've really tried to drive home how valid that other person will feel and how much they will appreciate you actually considering them. You know, so the next time you're in a conversation and something pops up, just let it pass, you know, like take a deep breath and swallow that thought and see what will happen. Let that other person talk and just notice their face. Like if this is something that, you know, you've potentially done for such a long time, challenge that, you know, and see how much the other person appreciates that. And I guarantee you that you will have deeper, longer lasting friendships. Nilly, that sounded like an ad for something else. Deeper, anyway. But yes, and challenge you guys and let us know your experiences.
Yeah, hit us up on Instagram or Facebook, literally anywhere. Send us a video message. We love getting those from you guys. Huge shout out to those guys who leave us a rating on iTunes. It really makes our week, sometimes even year. We've got nothing else going on in our lives, and that just really fulfills us. No,
constantly refreshing.
Into self-development, and all we do is just like online validation. So we hope you've gotten some value out of this. It's definitely a skill that we're practicing, and we generally have themes in our life, and that's what we bring to the podcast, is themes that we're noticing, things that we're trying to improve on. And we love having this journey with the small community that we've built. Thank you again for getting meta with us.
And guys, if anything resonated with you today, if any of our other podcasts have really hit you and you feel like maybe you would like some guidance or a mentor along the process, you can utilize the 15 Meta Minutes, where it's a free service. I'll call you up and we will unpack your dream life, and we'll really try to understand what it is that you want out of life. And then we have that 8-week program where we actually touch on active listening. We touch on, you know, psychological peak and flow, and there's so much in it. You know, there's the meta mindset section, and yeah, really valuable stuff. It's helped us along our journey. So if you guys,
we've seen some amazing results with some of the people that have gone through the program. So
yeah, so that's it, guys. That's a free 15 minutes if you would like to hit that up.
Should be in our Instagram description. So just jump in that. You get 15 minutes with this beautiful guy, this cozy guy. Cool. Thanks, guys. Have a fantastic day.